Hello my dears! I'm Artelza and this is my channel. And today's review is gonna be about the film Pride and Prejudice, directed by British filmmaker Joe Wright. It's based on the work of the brilliant writer Jane Austen. But before we start today's review, like, comment, subscribe and activate the bell notifies. Pride and Prejudice is a 2005 film. The feature film is one of several adaptations of the famous literary novel of the same name by the English writer Jane Austen, published in 1813. The plot takes place in England at the end of the 18th century and features the Bennet family, formed by a couple and their 5 daughters. The mother of the girls is a lady very anxious for her daughters to make good marriages. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, one of the older ones, will only agree to marry for love. She's so romantic. She's a romantic girl. She meets Mr. Darcy, a rich and handsome but seemingly snobby boy, with whom he develops a contradictory relationship. This is because at the time, the only aspiration and accomplishment of a woman was, theoretically, marriage and motherhood. Thus, it is in this scenario that the matriarch of the Bennet family uses all her energies for the daughters to marry. Also because the couple had no male children and if the patriarch died, the goods would go to the nearest man in the family lineage. Thus, the film already begins with a great uproar because of the arrival of young singles in the city. Mr. Bingley is a rich boy who has just arrived at the place and decides to promote a ball in his mansion, calling all the girls. Obviously, the Bennet sisters attend the party, and the host is enchanted by Jane, the older sister. It is on this occasion also that Elizabeth meets Mr. Darcy, Bingley's personal friend. Lizzie, as Elizabeth is called, does not have a good impression of the subject, because her shyness and disinterest pass the idea of arrogance. However, one can already notice a certain attraction between them. There is one passage of the film that already shows a lot of refinement and elaborate dance, leaving to show the superficiality of the bourgeoisie. One of the first dialogues between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy is worth mentioning. "Do you dance, Mr. Darcy?" "Not if you can help it." With this short and direct answer, Lizzie already creates a dislike for the boy. The Bennet family receives a visit from Mr. Collins, a cousin attached to the church who is looking for a bride. At first he was interested in Jane, but since the girl was already involved with Mr. Bentley, her cousin chooses Elizabeth. However, due to her moralistic, tedious, predictable, and forced temperament, Lizzie does not accept the request. There is one scene that is even more evident the decided and sincere personality of the character, revealing an unusual woman by the standards of the time. The refusal to request makes Elizabeth's mother furious. In the course of the plot, Lizzie and Mr. Darcy end up meeting several times, most of them at random. There's always a tense atmosphere between them. One of the factors that contributes to Elizabeth distrusting the boy is that she once heard that he had been sensitive and selfish with a childhood friend, the Wickham military. Later, it comes to his ears that Darcy was also responsible for his sister's separation with Mr. Billing. With this information, Elizabeth lives a mixture of feelings for the boy. Despite the strong attraction, there's refusal and pride. Even with the troubled relationship, Mr. Darcy, who is in love, takes courage and declares himself to Lizzie. The scene takes place in the rain, which gives an even more dramatic tone. Mr. Darcy really nurtures feelings of love for Elizabeth. However, the way you declare them is fraught with prejudice, as it makes it clear that you feel superior due to your financial condition. Lizzie then refuses him and says she will never marry anyone who messed with her sister Jane by marrying the man she loved. After a while, Mr. Darcy goes to Elizabeth and delivers a letter, in which he opens his heart and tells his version of the facts. Elizabeth decides to travel with her uncles and ends up going to Mr. Darcy's mansion, as it was open to public visitation. The girl believed he'd be traveling. Meanwhile, she is surprised by the boy's presence and runs away embarrassed. But the girl's looking for you. They therefore resume contact. In calmer spirits, after the letter, Lizzie manages to allow himself to see the young man with other eyes. The protagonist receives a message saying that her younger sister Lydia had fled with the Wickham military, which would ruin her family. Lydia is found by Mr. Darcy, who pays Wickham a large sum to marry the girl. Lizzie learns about what happened and is grateful to Darcy. Elizabeth finally says to love. One day the Bennet family receives the unexpected visit of Mr. Bentley and Mr. Darcy. The sisters and mother quickly arrange to welcome them, and Mr. Bentley asks to speak to Jane alone. The young man declares himself and asks for the hand of the young woman in marriage, which he promptly accepts. Elizabeth then finally says to her feelings, and the two get married. There is an alternative end for Pride and Prejudice. In the film, the scene that was officially chosen to end the story shows Elizabeth asking her father's permission to marry Mr. Darcy. However, there is an alternative scene that was not for original cut that displays the long-awaited kiss between the couple. In it, the two are already married and have a very sensitive and romantic dialogue. Jane Austen's stories usually have happy endings, but they do not fail to provoke questions and reflections about the values of society of the time. In the case of Pride and Prejudice, the message that remains is the importance of honesty with one's own feelings and self-love. But beyond that, the need to recognize when one makes a bad judgment of the other and the courage to change his mind and to give himself to love. And now We're going to share the point of view of three fanatical Jane Austen readers invited here on the channel Coffee with Review. And our first guest is Adriana Rocha. She will defend and analyze the characteristics of her favorite character. Hello, Adriana. Welcome to the channel. Ready? So you can start.
Hello, Aretusa. Thanks for the invite. Pride and Prejudice is a fantastic movie. I love this movie. It is a history of drama and romance with social themes. The character Mr. Darcy, even though he initially didn't like Elizabeth, he always complimented her because it was his custom of the time. Had relationships and their rules. The dance were also part of the relationships because it was the way to get to know each the other. The simple gesture of Darcy holding Elizabeth's hand. It was an enemy gesture according to society. Unlike today, people dance to have fun and shaking their hands normally. The woman of that time didn't marry for love, but to have a home, family, a man to support her. And the marriage was for life. So this really is an interesting movie. Thank you very much.
And the next guest will be Aline Miranda. She will explain to us about the theme of marriage rules linked to the financial issues dealt with in the film.
Hello, Aretusa. It is a pleasure to be here now. About some rules of marriage, divorce, and property of that time, we can analyze through the characters created by Jane Austen. It was clear that any property a woman owned before her marriage automatically became her husband. The man who was married to a woman only for wealth was called fortuitous. This is why in his story Mr. Wickham tried to run away with Georgiana. The Elizabeth character did not pose as an individual enforcer in his time, but we can say that she was a woman ahead of her time. She could not stand the idea of being forced to marry someone from choosing who don't like.
And finally, but not least, our guest Elaine Pereira. Be welcome, Elaine.
Hi guys, a part of this film that catch my attention is Elizabeth's position in a society that so silent woman. Her self-confidence and her way of always look beyond set her apart from the female mods of the time. This is especially noticeable in the scene where she rejects Mr. Collins' marriage proposal, even knowing that this attitude can affect the financial life of her family. She shows that she does not seek a marriage that represents negotiation, as we see in the characters Lydia and Charlotte. She seeks sentimentality and love, something that was taken from the reality of woman. Because of Elizabeth's strength, I consider Pride and Prejudice the best literary film of all time. Leave her my indication for you who like and are involved in the women's cause and would like to know more about the growing role of women in literature.
And that was a review today. So I finish here. I hope you enjoy it and don't forget to leave your like, to turn on notifications, and Until the next Cough with Review.